Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IS English. Now today we are going to discuss an important current development relating to Indian Navy. Because we all know in 2022, Indian Navy commissioned its first indigenous aircraft carrier known as INS Vikrant. But back then Indian Navy and by that extension Indian government faced with one dilemma. That which fighter aircraft would serve on this very beautiful deck of INS Vikrant. Now, naturally, the policymakers had multiple options. First was to develop and manufacture an aircraft of its own. So, naturally, the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited (HAL) and DRDO, that is Defense Research Development Organization, came up with a concept fighter aircraft known as twin engine deck based fighter aircraft. Now, according to HAL and DRDO, this aircraft would be based on modern design, have advanced avionics and technology which will allow it to serve on the decks of Indian aircraft carriers for a considerable long period of time. But you understand, Indian policymakers and Indian companies also had one problem. That to power aircrafts, you need powerful engines, but Indian companies do not have one. So, in order to make such aircrafts, you would need engines from other countries like France or US. Also, to develop a different aircraft as against HAL Tejas, which will be suited specifically for Navy's configuration, you need larger amount of research and development. First, you need to make a prototype aircraft which would be airworthy enough. Also, you need to integrate modern design, modern technologies and weapon systems into these aircrafts and test this prototype in different conditions. And naturally, all of this would require large amount of time. Sometimes it can even stretch into decades. But you understand, the Navy's requirement is immediate and it can't wait for decades for a new indigenous fighter aircraft irrespective of its capability. So the second option the Navy had was buying additional MiG-29K fighter aircrafts, as Indian Navy currently operates 40 of these aircrafts on its earlier purchased aircraft carrier known as INS Vikramaditya. Now you understand, Indian Navy is not the sole operator of this aircraft in India. Also, Indian Air Force has 75 of these aircrafts, and this aircraft is quite potent aircraft. It is quite fast. It can climb higher distances or altitude in short amount of time, allowing it to play a role of an interceptor aircraft for the Indian Armed Forces. Similarly, Indian Armed Forces, both Air Force and Navy, have experience to use these kind of aircrafts in different battle and war-like scenarios. So you understand, this would prove as a natural alternative to an indigenous aircraft, and naturally Indian Navy could have bought additional of these aircrafts. But there is also a certain problem with these kind of aircrafts. First is that these aircrafts were developed in 1980. So when you compare it with modern 4.5 generation aircrafts like Rafale, like F-18, these technology and the capabilities of these aircrafts, they actually pale in comparison. Also, you have to source these aircrafts from Russia, and you understand Russia is right now engaged in war with Ukraine. So the defense companies of Russia, they are stretched financially, they are stressed operationally because of higher requirements and to fulfill these requirements for Russian armed forces. So you understand, in spite of several sanctions, importing such aircrafts from Russia would be quite difficult and expensive affair. So Navy went with a third option, that it wanted to procure a newer system of aircrafts to serve on the deck of INS Vikrant. And naturally, Indian Navy had two alternatives. First was American-based F-18 aircrafts, and another one was French Rafale M aircrafts. Now you understand, Indian Armed Forces, they have already procured 36 of French aircrafts specifically configured for Indian configuration and the needs of Indian Armed Forces. Now, after testing these two aircrafts extensively on an Indian Navy based facility in Goa, Indian Navy came up with the conclusion that it will procure Rafale M from the France. And accordingly, Cabinet Committee on Security has given its approval to procure 26 Rafale M aircrafts from France. Now you understand, these Rafale M aircrafts, these are a similar aircraft as compared to Indian Air Force Rafales, but they also differ significantly in terms of its capabilities, because these aircrafts would serve on an aircraft carrier and also in a maritime condition, so it requires different kind of a configuration. Now let us quickly understand the capabilities of Rafale aircraft. Now Rafale is an aircraft manufactured and developed by a French company known as Dassault Aviation, and also it has twin engines, which means the amount of power that the engines of this aircraft generates is higher as compared to single generation aircrafts. Also, the role this kind of an aircraft can play is known as multi-role, which means it is capable of deep strikes, it is capable of defending the aerospace region of our maritime, and also conducting reconnaissance and maritime operations. Similarly, it has a single seat configuration as against twin seat and single seat configuration of the Indian Air Force Rafale aircrafts, and the generation which highlights the capabilities of this aircraft, this is categorized as a 4.5 generation aircraft, making it much more advanced as compared to MiG-29K aircrafts. Now these Rafale M, these are having advanced avionics and AESA radar, which makes it quite a potent fighter jet. Similarly, it has advanced armaments like Meteor, beyond visual range air-to-air missile. Similarly, a smaller range multi-mission air-to-air missile system, MICA, is also there in this, and also Scalp missiles, which allows it to penetrate hardened targets on ground, and Exonet anti-ship weapon system is what makes this aircraft platform quite potent and relevant for India's Navy configuration. Now let us quickly understand the differences between the Rafale aircrafts of Indian Air Force and Indian Navy. Now Indian Navy aircraft would have a heavier airframe because you need to make additional reinforcements for any aircraft which has to be operated on an aircraft carrier. Because to land on an aircraft carrier, the aircraft has a hook attached to it which needs to be tangled with the harnesses that are there in the aircraft carrier, and once the hook is attached to the harnesses, this allows the aircraft carrier to pull the aircrafts back into it, leading to high stress in the structures of the aircraft. Therefore, you need to make additional reinforcements so that damage does not happen to the aircraft. Similarly, its radar and electronic warfare systems have to be acclimatized and developed for maritime applications, because once an aircraft is flying over the waters, it also needs to have the capability to understand and track ships as well as submarines which are underwater, right? So therefore, you need more powerful radars, electronic warfare system which are optimized to be used underwater. Similarly, it needs to have enhanced landing capabilities which would make it land over any kind of aircraft system or aircraft carrier which would have Katobar or Stratobar recovery systems. Now, these are kind of assisted recovery and launching systems, because you understand the runways in the aircraft carriers, those are not as long as the runways located on the land-based airports, right? Because runways on the aircraft carrier, they stretch barely 200 to 300 meters. On the other hand, runways on the land-based airports, these stretch kilometers. So to enable aircrafts which has a huge armaments and payload, you need certain kind of an assistance from the aircraft carriers which would help them aircrafts launch into the air, right? So these enhanced landing and launching capabilities, these are eligible and configured for Rafales also. But not just the differences, but the Navy's Rafale also has similar capabilities as compared to IAF Rafales. That is, it has a common suite of armaments and avionics which ensures that the cost efficiency in maintaining and operating these aircrafts over the different kinds of warfare and technical domains, it would be allowed so that the navies and the air force, they can commonly operate and function their aircraft. Similarly, the cost which is associated in establishing a newer weapon systems initially can be quite high, but as you procure more aircrafts of that kind, the overall cost per aircraft reduces. So therefore, Indian government has decided to procure additional Rafale aircrafts for its naval role also, right? Now, this kind of a development actually plays an important role for Indian Navy, because Indian Navy sees itself as a net protector of the broader Indian Ocean region. And you understand, India, it sits near to the world's most critical sea lanes. For example, there's Strait of Hormuz, which is located on the coast of Iran, and it is crucial for oil which is transported from Gulf to India. Similarly, moving south, there's this Gulf of Eden and Bab al-Mandeb Strait, which is a gateway of India when ships needs to travel to Suez Canal and eventually to Mediterranean Sea and European waters. Also, there's a Strait of Malacca, which is a lifeline for Asian trade, and it connects India with Southeast Asian countries and eventually to Pacific Ocean. Similarly, the Sunda and Lombok Straits that provides us strategic routes for Pacific and Indian Ocean connectivity. Also, very nearby to India, there's this Lakshadweep Chagos Gap, which is key to ensuring freedom of navigation and determining and deterring hostile incursions. So, all of these choke points, Strait of Hormuz near Iran, Strait of Bab el Mandab near Yemen, Strait of Malacca between Singapore and Indonesia. Similarly, the Sunda and Lombok Strait here, as well as other Lakshadweep and Chagos Gap here. These all areas needs to be monitored and surveilled by Indian Armed Forces and particularly Indian Navy. So Indian Navy, in order to dominate this region, would need a potent weapon source, a potent aircraft, which is actually the Rafale aircraft. And naturally, whenever Indian aircraft carriers would be operating on these waters, having Rafale aircraft would make them more potent, and it will allow it to play a dominant role in combating any threat that might emerge to Indian interest. But what about the needs of defense indigenization? Had we had developed a TED or TED BF aircraft, wouldn't be in a better place? The answer is yes. But you understand, the Indian Navy needs certain kind of potent aircraft systems immediately to serve the needs of its security requirements. So therefore, Indian government has opted to procure 26 Rafale M aircrafts on a stopgap basis and not to replace its eventual development of a indigenous fighter aircraft. It is only to fill the gap until the indigenous option is ready. Also, it can be seen as a strategic compromise. Why? It allows Indian Navy to meet its current operational needs with a proven platform while continuing its efforts and investment to make an indigenous aircraft. And also, procuring these kind of aircrafts gives us an opportunity to sign technology transfer deals, defense cooperation with France, which will allow and accelerate our own indigenous development of aircraft. Understand? So this is all from my side for today. I leave you with this PYQ of the year 2024. Please let me know the correct answer in the comment section, and also what do you feel about this development? Also let me know in the comment section. So I'll see you again. Until then, please give me permission to end this session.